Good. Hello, my fellow Americans. This is Bill Lipinski, and this is Two Guys on Politics. And the number one guy is up next, Ray Hanania.
And hey, Bill, it's good to see you this week, and hopefully everything is going well for you. I am Ray Hanania, and this is Two Guys on Politics, June 6th, 2024, Season 3, Episode 16, I believe. And we got a bunch of topics. D-Day, the 80th anniversary. We'll talk a little bit about should we give Americans who fight for foreign countries veterans benefits, because there are a couple members of Congress who want to do that. When we did our last podcast, the Trump trial actually resulted in a jury decision right after we posted our podcast, so we can talk a little bit about his legal challenges, what the ramifications of his conviction on 34 counts, and also his upcoming challenges, legal challenges. And then something that I think is really important to Illinois voters, they've changed the election schedule to require people to file for office sooner rather than later. And they put some other caveats on criteria on what that means. So that's all interesting. But Bill, you've done a lot of research on D-Day. Tell us, this is the 80th year, everybody says, since the D-Day invasion on June 6th, I believe, correct? Today is the anniversary.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. From 1944 till today.
Right. Yep, that is correct. And it was the greatest invasion in the history of the world. There was 160,000 Allied troops involved in this invasion on D-Day. 73,000 were Americans, 83,000 were English and Canadians. We must remember them. Now, up on top of those hills and mountains that we had to scale, there were 50,000 Germans that were shooting down rifle fire, machine gun fire, throwing down hand grenades. It was really a very, very difficult operation. We lost 2,500 American soldiers on that day. In one day, 2,500 Americans died. There was another 5,000 that were wounded. So you can see what a significant battle this was. Everybody has seen those cliffs that the American Rangers had to climb.
Right.
There were 225 of them that started out. 90 of them reached the top. Many of the others were killed or wounded. So you can see the attrition rate was really quite substantial. I think that Americans, as time has gone by, I think the world, as time has gone by, has forgotten about what a major accomplishment that was, the invasion of Europe. 160,000 people, invading Europe to liberate Europe from the Nazis. It's 80 years ago. I don't really remember it. I've seen a lot of programs about it on TV. I've learned a lot about it. It was one of the most significant battles in the history of the world, good against evil. But I think people have forgotten about it, and I hope that we can do something to restore their knowledge of D-Day. I understand that Biden gave a pretty good speech today on D-Day. I hope that was the case. I didn't have an opportunity to see it, but when I do see it, I hope that I will be impressed.
Yeah, I saw part of Biden's remarks and that he read, because he's on a teleprompter, unfortunately, but nonetheless, I thought he did a pretty decent job. And I think you're right. D-Day is so significant. From what I understand, it was the largest military operation of its kind ever in terms of warfare. It's just huge. And when you see the movies, or even when you see the images of those cliffs, how tall they were, even with the battleships out in the water facing Normandy, they, firing those, missiles and bombs, trying to weaken the German defenses, it was still very difficult. So many Americans got killed as they stepped out of their, landing
And
craft that they landed on at Omaha Beach.
not only at Omaha Beach, but at the other 4 beaches that we invaded. We invaded 2 beaches, and the Canadians and the English invaded 3. But unfortunately, for some reason, we wound up with the 2 toughest beaches of them all. And the 3 that the English and the British had, they were tough. It was still a tough battle, but it was nothing like the 2 that we had.
Yeah, it was like, I think it was 50 miles long.
Yes.
And I think some of the names of the beaches were the Utah Beach, the Omaha Beach, Gold Beach, Juno Beach, and Sword. I think there was a 5th one. And a lot of they said they had a tough time with the weather, particularly at Utah and Omaha, with the landing crafts being pushed out by the heavy winds and the storms. But it just, I don't know if, for somebody to say, I'm going to fight, defend our country, and free the world, and put their life on the line like that, and probably one of the worst moments of deadly exposure. The flap came down on those landing craft, and you may have had 80 soldiers sitting in that craft that were quickly targeted by the Germans. In one spot, they had to jump out as fast as they could into the waters, try to make it through to the beach. Then when they get to the beach, they're still being bombed and shot at. It's amazing that only that many Americans and our allies died, during that important invasion, which began the collapse of the Nazi regime and then the end of the Japanese imperialism.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That's very, very true. And I think we certainly had the right guy leading it, the Supreme Commander, Ike Eisenhower.
Right.
I think that he was the man that could pull everybody together. He wasn't the greatest military strategist, but he was a great individual in bringing people together, getting people to unite behind one single cause, as he was when he was president. I mean, he did a great job as president of the United States also, because he knew we were one nation, and he had to put forth programs that would serve all the American people.
Yeah, I always looked at Eisenhower as one of the top presidents that we've had, including Reagan, obviously. And as I mentioned, I think before, when I was young, because my father served during World War II with his brother, and they served in the OSS, which became the CIA years later. But my uncle served on a battleship in the North Atlantic for 4 years. Now, that to me, with 4 years on a battleship, that would be terrible. And then my dad served 4 years because they both enlisted after Pearl Harbor within a week. They both went in and enlisted, and he served 4 years in Europe, near Italy and North Africa, and in the Middle East, because of his background in Arabic, to crack the German codes that were being sent to direct their forces to kill our soldiers. So he didn't land, on Omaha Beach. He was there, beforehand. But those young soldiers that had to look death in the face the way they did, it was so heroic what they did. I don't know if people today would continue to do that.
I don't think that they would, unfortunately. I think you had to be from that era. You had to believe in America. You had to believe in democracy. And unfortunately, I don't know how many people we have in this country that still believe in freedom and democracy and free enterprise. But that's another story for another day.
Yeah, and with social media, everybody, suddenly has an opinion. They're all writers, and there are as many people that say some pretty dumb things. I'm sure that they would have come under assault. Now, just a little quick side view on this thing, this whole issue of veterans and loyalty. I wrote a column this week at my website at Hanania.com about members of Congress. Some of them served in the military, who want to give benefits to Americans who serve in the military of foreign countries. So they introduced a law specifically for Israel where there are 23,000 Americans with dual citizenship who not necessarily fought in the US military, but have gone to Israel, which again is a foreign country, enlisted in their military, swore an oath to Israel, and now they want to give them benefits. And this isn't about whether Israel is right or wrong or the Palestinians are right or wrong. I would be offended if anybody were allowed to serve in the military of any foreign country, friend or foe, because you never know how long, the Japanese were our enemies. Now they're our friends. The Chinese are our enemies now. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? I think you have to have loyalty to one country, not to two. So
Well,
for me, it was being a veteran. It was I think it was I'm just disappointed in those two members of Congress, Miller and Reschenthaler, from Ohio and Pennsylvania, who introduced the law. Hopefully, it's not going to go far.
Well, I think it's absolutely ludicrous for the American taxpayer to be expected to pay anything for people who fight under a flag other than the United States of America flag. And those people, they're on their own. They have no affiliation. They should have no connection with our country. We're not in,
right.
We have no troops on the ground in the Far East or in the
Middle East.
Middle East, rather, I'm sorry,
Right.
And in Ukraine. So anyone that's fighting there that's an American with dual citizenship, as far as I'm concerned, they are on their own. If they're so anxious to fight an enemy, they should join the American army and get us prepared for anything that might come forward.
Protect this country, because the country has done so much for us as a veteran. My father, he's Middle Eastern, but he was loyal to the day after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Him and his brother went right to the recruiting station. His brother was a year, maybe 2 years older than him. They both enlisted. They didn't hesitate because they really believed they were both legal immigrants, became citizens, built their families and careers here, and they were grateful for what America did for them. They didn't go to Palestine and fight in the Palestinian military or the Jordanian military and then swear allegiance to another country. They only swore allegiance to one country. And to me, that is the first step in a major sacrifice that we were talking about during the invasion of Normandy on D-Day 80 years ago. Those young men, they swore an oath to protect our country. 2,400, I think you said, lost their lives.
Yes, there were. Let me see. I don't want to be misquoted. I don't want you to.
Well, I'm a journalist.
25.
I'm a journalist, so we often misquote people. So don't worry about.
I'm a statesman, so I want to be accurate. Okay.
But that is those, they gave their lives, and the best way to honor them, I think, is to, strengthen the loyalty to this country. So anyway, and then also, in our last week when we did our podcast, we were talking about the Trump legal case. The verdict did not come down until about an hour after we finished our podcast. He was convicted on 34 counts. I was a little surprised that he got nailed on all 34. They have a sentencing, I think, that's going to be 3 days before the Republican convention. It just seems, everything just to me sounds political, but I noticed that Trump's popularity is increasing as a result of those convictions, because many people feel that those prosecutions were more political than anything else. And as much as the Democrats deny it, I think that there are a lot of people that are disturbed by the way we've gone after a former president. He was the president of the United States. And if they can convict him, I don't know, maybe they can convict anybody for almost any reason. I just don't think it was fair, but, it's part of his personality.
Well, I don't like him. I think he's reprehensible. But I did predict that he would not be found guilty. So I was incorrect about that. But I was correct about the fact I said, if he was found guilty, he would gain points in polls. He would actually gain some people who were non-committed to him as voters. So I got 2 out of 3 correct. But, this continues to go on and on. The Democrats bringing him to trial in various cases, and all they're doing is making his chances of being reelected or once again elected president of the United States greater.
Yeah, and of course, I always believe that if you want to help somebody, you help them. You don't spend all your time attacking the person you want to help's enemy. I think it's a big mistake, the way the Democrats and the media have put all the focus on Trump, and they seem so desperate. It seems like there's a desperation in the Democratic Party, keeping Kennedy off of the debates. And by the way, I'm going to, hopefully, if CNN approves me, we'll see if they approve me. I'm supposed to be covering the presidential debate between Biden and Trump that'll take place, I think, that Thursday of the week of June 27th. I think it's June 27th in a few weeks. I'll be happy to, if I get to go.
I think you're much too objective about the fight going on in Gaza to be accepted to CNN.
Yeah, they have to decide who they're going to allow to come in there. And I'm thinking, when did the media become so manipulative and controlled? Why not just whoever wants to cover it should be allowed to cover it? And I really am upset, though, with the fact that they've excluded Kennedy from that debate. It just seems they are worried about Kennedy. Everything defines Biden as being weak, all the actions that are being taken. He's not a totally weak president. He's smart, but he's getting very old. But his own allies are doing things to protect him, which suggests they fear his weakness is going to undermine him.
Oh, that's very true. This Kennedy should be allowed to be involved in those debates. We went all over that last week. We're not going to go over that all. But if you're really interested in being a true American, you should see to it that Kennedy is on that platform. He definitely has enough support across the country. You should give him an opportunity. I'm not saying to vote for him. I'm not saying not to vote for him, but he should have the opportunity. This is America. This is a land of freedom. We should not control our elections, to bar certain people from running like they do in Russia, in China, in a number of other totalitarian states that are not our friends.
And it could be said that even in Illinois, right? Because there was new legislation that was introduced and adapted here in Illinois that says, we're coming close to the Illinois elections after the presidential election, for next year's gubernatorial election, I believe. Their legislators running, their municipal elections. But I think if I read this correctly, maybe you can help us understand it, that this new law basically says that only candidates who run in the primary election can be on the general election ballot. So when they run in the primary for next year, I believe they're going to file earlier. And if they are not on the primary election ballot, then they can't run. Now, why is that? What do you think there were and this is a blue state, one of the bluest. So we're talking about the Democrats. Why do you think they did that?
They want to be even more bluer. The Democrats control the governorship, the House, and the Senate. The Republicans, for a number of years, did not conduct any primaries. And the reason for that was they were trying to save their money for general elections. And they didn't want to open up any wounds within their Democratic Party. So they tried to persuade people to work things out so that there would only be one candidate out of each Senate district or representative district from the Republican Party. So by doing what they are doing now, they are saying to the Republicans, if you don't run somebody in the primary, at least one candidate, then you're not going to be able to have a candidate on the general election ballot. I don't know what could be more un-American. I don't know how the Democrats in this state can possibly, rationalize this and say it's okay. My heavens, if the Republicans did that to them 40 years ago, 50 years ago, when the Republicans controlled almost everything in this state, they would have been screaming bloody murder. How unfair it is. But now that they're doing it, most of the media doesn't seem to care one way or another. So I hope that people that do care hear what we're saying and understand that the Republicans for years haven't run people in the primary. They wanted to save their money. They didn't want any controversy within their party. But now they won't be able to do that. They're going to have to put at least one person up in the primary. And once you do that, you know as well as I that other people are going to jump into that primary. So whoever the Republicans support, it's going to cost them money to get that person nominated. It's going to cause problems within the Republican Party, because people will be campaigning against one another. If you want to look at it from a very crass political standpoint, very smart move by the Democrats, but it's not very American.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I'm one of those people who opposes term limits, for example, in local elections, because I think the voters are the deciding factor on whether someone's elected or not elected. It's always disappointing, though, when we see a lot of voters disgusted by the political system and they don't vote. Like in the last election, the turnout was so low. I mean, 20%, right, a little higher than 20%, in some places 17%. That tells you there's something wrong in our political system. And I think what's wrong in our political system is the attempt by some politicians to manipulate the system to give themselves an advantage rather than to give the voters an advantage. Voters should be able to hear from everybody. Voters should be able to have a choice. I mean, a responsible choice, but still a choice. And I think for those people, just to understand what we're talking about, sometimes we would have a candidate, let's just say, running for state rep, who might be a Democrat in a primary, and that there's no, or a congressperson, a member of Congress running in a congressional district as a Democrat, but there's no Republican primary. Under this law, I don't know if that applies to federal races or just local races.
No, it can't apply to federal. It cannot apply to federals, no.
So this might be just state legislative races where an incumbent Democrat runs for office in the primary, no Republican running against them. And then what happens? The Republican Party would find somebody to take that seat. As a matter of fact, I think when I left the Chicago Sun-Times, Milton Rakoff was one of my mentors, and he said the best way to understand politics is to run in politics. So I ran for a seat in the 38th House District in the southwest suburbs of Chicago, just to understand what it was like. And I have to tell you, it was the worst experience of my life. I don't know how anybody can run for public office and go through that mud raking, vicious attacks, not just from the media if they don't like you, but from your opponent who has a lot of money. But they slated me. I didn't run in a primary. And I remember the former speaker, the great speaker of the Illinois House, called me, and Mike Madigan, and asked me, would I be interested in running? They wanted to slate me. So the Democrats slated me. It was a pretty good experience. I got close, but I lost by just under 2,000 votes out of, I think it was 70,000 votes cast or more. I can't remember the total number, but that's the process we're talking about, right?
That's the process we're talking about, yes, sir. And I just want to say, Ray, I thought politics was great, but I ran as a statesman. I was elected to the Chicago City Council twice. I was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives 11 times. So I continue to pat myself on the back. I never lost an election.
Well, you should, because you were reelected because of the will of the people having faith in you. To me, that is so much more important than being elected to the office, because the political cronies, which is a negative term, but your political allies decided they want to make it easy for somebody to stay in office, that really takes the vote away from the voters, I think, and really does a disservice. And yet nobody understands the system. There wasn't a big outcry against this, and it just went right through, and it's now a
Absolutely.
law. It's just horrible. So
Oh,
I don't know.
one thing I wanted to bring up, Ray, you had mentioned earlier, and I think that you should talk about it for a few minutes, the difference between the Democrats who now are after Trump for his alleged affair with a striptease woman,
Right.
a prostitute, a porno star, and how the Democrats were when Bill Clinton had an affair in the Oval Office of the White House with a young intern.
Yeah, I mean, listen, at that time, I think that Hillary Clinton said that this was right-wing political, manipulations and conspiracy to undermine the process, that the attacks against her husband, she wasn't Tammy Wynette sitting there next to her husband after the husband, Bill Clinton, who was not stupid, he was a very smart guy, tried to get away with it by playing a game with the term sexual relations. Now, we all know what happened between him and Monica Lewinsky, but the fact that the Republicans actually, while they went after Clinton, they were very respectful of Clinton. They limited the amount of time that he was being asked to testify before the grand jury. That's unheard of. If they had done that with Trump, they'd be it was a Republican saying, oh, you only have to take questions for 4 hours, which is what they did with Clinton. So Clinton, every time he was asked a question, went on for 10, 20 minutes answering it until the 4 hours. He was a master, but I'm not saying that, Trump, the difference between how they treated Clinton, the bending over backwards to defend him, in the face of how many perjury charges, how many lies that he made about what was happening. He didn't pay Monica Lewinsky, but his interference in talking with her, telling her, you don't have to testify, just keep denying it. Those kind of actions would constitute felony crimes. And the worst he got was an impeachment. Trump, now we're talking 20 years later, over almost 30 years later, they went after him with far greater enthusiasm and a compromise of the judicial system. He was a former president. They gave him no breaks, the way they gave Clinton breaks. And we know why they gave Clinton breaks, because they knew that was his last term in office, and Hillary Clinton was being groomed and prepared to become one of the future presidents over the next 4 or 8 years. And she stood by him to protect that future rather than to protect the integrity of the rule of law. Today, it doesn't seem like anybody cares about the rule of law, and that to me is really sad.
Yes, it is very, very sad. It's a very sad commentary on our country today.
All right, Bill. Anyway, I think we've covered a lot of topics. Anything else coming up?
No, I just hope that everybody remembers those brave Americans who died on the day that we invaded the continent of Europe to free all those people who had been enslaved by the Nazis. I hope those people are remembered today.
And I think there are very, very few survivors of World War II, people who served during World War II. I heard it was only a handful of Americans that are left. I remember meeting a couple when I went to Pearl Harbor to visit my daughter, who was serving with the U.S. government. And I got to meet like 6 World War II veterans, but that was something like 15 years ago. And they were, very old. So we're losing them fast and quick. So I agree with you. We need to remember them. So
absolutely.
I'm Ray Hanania.
I'm Bill Lipinski.
And this has been Two Guys on Politics, June 6th, 2024, the 80th anniversary of the D-Day invasion. We'll be back again next week, and we appreciate and thank you for watching or listening. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.